Hi, good morning. Thank you for joining us. I am your pre-lunch hostess and presenter today. My name is Rebecca Sitton. I'm the Assistive Technology Coordinator at North Carolina State University, and I am located in the Disability Resource Office. I've been supporting students, faculty, and staff with accessibility and accommodations for 11 years here at NC State, and using technology to bridge the gap between what people want to do and what they may not be able to do for about 22 years overall. And today we're going to cover some basic multimedia accessibility. So, what is multimedia? Oops, there we go. Multimedia is a form of communication that combines different content forms such as text, audio, images, animations, or video into a single presentation. Some common forms of multimedia that we are familiar with are slideshows, presentations, infographics, videos, podcasts, blogs, webinars, and live conferencing like we're using here today. Over the last year, evidently every time I move my mouse, something happens. Over the last year, we have had to rely on more digital forms of communication and engagement. Many of us have had to make a jump in using video-based or live conferencing meeting software and have adjusted to communicating and presenting this way. But we may or may not have been doing all that we can do to make the experience the best for everyone and to provide access, attending our presentations or using our content. And so today I'm going to cover some of the basic things to think about when creating, choosing, or utilizing multimedia. So I'd like to say, let's think about the basic ways we synthesize information. The two main ways we synthesize information are with our eyes and with our ears. And if we have limitations in either, we may be missing content presented through multimedia. So when you're creating or choosing content, there's some basic things we can do that doesn't require a technical degree to ensure and keep a check on if everyone is able to access that content. First, when selecting a multimedia element, watch the video. Watch it as you are able in your natural state to do. Next, watch it again and close your eyes. Do you hear the elements and understand what's being presented? What key concepts there are? If not, what can you do to choose or create a better element? Can you find another video? Think about adding an audio track, write a text-based video guide, something you can do to provide information to fill that gap. Second, maybe cover your ears and watch the video or turn the sound down on your video. Does the video have captioning? Can you visually understand the key concepts being presented? If not, what can you do to create that? Can you add captioning? Can you find a video with captioning? A lot of times if we're choosing YouTube content, that may not have been where it originally is placed. So sometimes you have to do a little searching for maybe some different content with captioning available. Same thing with movies and videos. You might have to search a couple of different places. The first place you find a video may not be accessible, but you might find it in another location on the internet in an accessible way. Lastly, many people can't use a mouse to control the computer. So we call it the tab test. Can you tab through the controls on your multimedia element? Most of the time, a presentation. Can you visually identify where the keyboard has taken you when you hit that tab key? That's a good way to see if someone who uses the keyboard or a keyboard emulator can get to the player and utilize your multimedia. So again, all these are basic ways to check the accessibility of your multimedia elements. And so now we'll go into a little bit more detail. So let's talk about people with various disabilities that use assistive technology to process information. One of the best things you can do as a content creator is to provide an accessible document version of any visual information presented in your multimedia element that can be accessed beforehand if possible. People that use either text-to-speech software or screen reading technology can't read or understand the material if it's presented through a viewer. So if you provide a separate document, they can use their technology to break down that visual information either during your presentation or before your presentation, so they can really pay attention to what you're saying or what other elements are in that presentation or multimedia element. The best practice is to give them an opportunity to process that information using their technology to become familiar with that content. And so I get a lot of questions. Do I really need to provide it beforehand? It's really a great practice to do that, for people to digest some information before they come, so they can give that multimedia element or your presentation their full attention. When you're presenting, if you're using a presentation style multimedia element, a lot of people want to assume that people can see the information and read and interpret it for themselves. Best practice is to read or summarize that visual information as you are presenting, so that you don't leave anybody out inadvertently thinking they can read or be able to process the information. Again, people with learning disabilities, not just visual impairments, may not be able to read very clearly what you have on the screen. When you are creating visual elements, make sure that there is significant color contrast in the information, such as your text, your hyperlinks, your graphics, and your videos. And don't use color alone to indicate emphasis. You can underline, you can make the content bold to also emphasize the difference. If you're going to use a color contrast, like a hover element that changes color, make sure it has significant color contrast to really be seen by people, especially that are colorblind. Some of the things, like we use here a lot of red at NC State, so we might go from a bright red to a dark red, and sometimes that's to someone with color blindness just a different slight shade of gray, and they may not pick up that it's a hyperlink if it's not underlined or bolded or indicated on a having a hand to a pointer gesture. So let's talk a little bit about audio description. We had a question earlier in Judith's presentation about audio description and how to incorporate audio description. An audio description track describes what's seen on the screen. If you are a video or a content creator, if you're creating a recorded element, you can always design that content to be more auditorily descriptive. If you're finding content out on the internet and adding it to a website or to your class or to something you are doing, you might need to send it out for captioning. And there are third-party vendors that you can send and have the tracked audio described. A lot of our caption companies do audio description too. So if you need vendors, please reach out. We can help you with that. But a lot of people may not be familiar with audio description. So what I want to do is play a couple of tracks for you. These are some of my favorite. There's a couple of ways you can search for audio description. I'm going to share with you a resource in our resource page called the Audio Description Project. It's actually quite exciting to see how people are in Netflix, Hulu, people are including audio description in their creation now, and the movies that have audio description tracks that can be added or played by assistive technology. But let's take a trip down probably a few years ago, if anybody was into the Hunger Games, and watch what we call our traditional video when you went to the movies to watch the Hunger Games. I'm going to hit play. Can you guys hear that? No. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing a second because Zoom, I may not have hit share sound. So let's see. Are you guys back on the presentation now?
Yes, we see your speaker notes, Rebecca.
You see my speaker notes. Great. Thank you. All right. Share screen. Share sound, screen 2, here we go. Okay, so we're back on the Hunger Games, correct?
Yep, we're on the Hunger Games.
Yeah, so this is your traditional video that you may have gone to the movie theater and seen. So just as an idea, close your eyes and see if you can tell where you are and what's going on the screen. You might be able to hear the wilderness. But would you have any idea she's raising her bow and taking aim? Or hunting? Or she's dropped her arrow. Let me escape out of that. Now, let's listen to a track from the Hunger Games with audio description.
Signs on a tall wire fence read District Boundary, no access beyond this point, and High Voltage. Katniss steps through a gap in the wires and heads into the woods beyond. She glances around before reaching into the hollow of a fallen tree. She draws out a wooden bow. From another tree, she plucks out a sheaf of arrows and straps it over her shoulder. Katniss makes her way through thick green vegetation. Bow and arrow at the ready, she walks over a fallen tree suspended over the forest floor. She pauses, her gaze locked on a deer in the distance. Leaning against a tree trunk, she aims the bow and arrow. The deer sniffs the air and moves out of sight.
Okay, so let's see if I can get out of that. Okay.
Signs on a tall wire fence read District Boundary, no access beyond this point.
There we go. Okay, so I would rather listen to the audio described movie and really enjoy the auditory input of what's being processed on the screen. So that's how audio description, if you add it to your video or your multimedia element, you can increase engagement, right? And make it more accessible to your audience. Again, you can create an audio descriptive recording if you are including that as the content creator in your multimedia element. But again, you may have to send that out to send a video or some content that you want to use out to have audio description added. So those resources are going to be provided to you at the end of the presentation and my resources links. But there is a lot more content now than ever that has audio description. And again, just high level, when you are creating content, whether you're presenting, creating a slideshow, creating a video, make sure you use you think about what your script and what you're saying and how it can be auditorily described. So let's talk about some basic accessibility considerations for those that may have hearing loss. Try to choose or incorporate multimedia elements that have captioning, and always verify that those captions are accurate. In education, there are many programs like Flipgrid, etc., that will allow you to automatically add captions to your multimedia elements, but go back and make sure they are accurate. A lot of programs will allow editing. I know in Flipgrid, I've had to ask the instructor to turn on the editing privileges for those that add content. There are many free tools available to add captions. If you are creating a video, you can upload that to YouTube and use the live captioning, the automatic captioning tool to go in and generate some automatic captions, and then it's relatively easy to go in and edit those captions. Panopto, if you use recording or classroom capture, screen capture, Panopto has automatic live captioning as well. Again, most of these products in the last couple of years are really incorporating that live automatic transcription, just like we're doing here in Zoom today. And they give you the option and the ability to go in and edit those captions. tools to help you create the best live transcription is one, use a dedicated noise canceling microphone, reduce that background noise, and try, if possible, to create a script to speak from. That's going to make your speech more intelligible and able for the machine to learn and recognize what you are saying. You can always send any content out to a vendor. There are multiple vendors out there to create a transcript or to generate captioning. Try to start considering it as part of your video production and your routine in choosing content to check for captioning and add it automatically. Ask your students to learn this skill as well and to become, included in your rubrics for your projects and any assignments that may be due. They should be able to learn and create digital content accessibly. If we teach people how to do this on their own, then it becomes part of that process, and we're creating material that's accessible from creation, which is always good. If utilizing a live conferencing platform to broadcast, just like we are today with Zoom, enable the live transcript or captioning if available. It may not be accurate, 100% accurate, but it is at least an option. Use those headsets, speak clearly, speak as slowly as you can, and then if you need to, go back and edit and provide a recorded version that people can go back and rewatch. Podcast. Podcasts are exciting media elements. If you're adding a podcast to your website or to your course content, include a transcript. Sometimes, just like those videos, you have to dig a little deeper for the transcript. So this is a podcast without a transcript from Radiolab. You can actually download I was looking at the brown box podcast here. You can click on the listen button and it's going to play the audio version of this podcast. There is nothing that can be seen here in this podcast directory from NPR. Okay. Apple Podcast is the same way. Can't really get a transcript from Apple Podcast. So what you might need to do, this is a Radiolab podcast, is go back and to Radiolab, pull the original podcast of where it was produced, and come down and select the transcript. So again, when you're adding podcast, if it has a transcript, you might need to do a little searching for it. It may or may not have one. If it does have one, great, post the right link to the newyorkstudios.org presentation that has it. If not, you might want to consider sending that out for a transcript to be generated. Player accessibility. Again, just touching on that one more time. Make sure you can navigate the player using your keyboard. Again, that's called the tab test. It's very basic. It's also how we test websites, just making sure we can move through the elements. When you tap through those controls, is there a box that highlights around the control so you can see where you're at on the page? That's very important. That's called a keyboard focus indicator. It's getting into a little bit higher level than the basics, but again, a simple box around something gives your eyes something to focus on when you're tabbing through. Are there clear label controls? We've gone to icons for everything, and that's okay as long as the labels, either a hover or if you are able to use a screen reading software or a testing widget on Chrome, make sure the labels have accurate labels on them and somebody can see what they're controlling. A lot of people assume everybody knows what an icon means. We have all levels of digital literacy potentially in our audiences. So something that might look like a home button to me, if it's an older participant, they may not really understand what home is. So if you have a home element, they may have heard the word home and go back home, but they may not actually understand, especially a hollow element without doors and windows being home. Additional accessibility features, a little bit above the tabbing through and the labels. Can you change the speed of the video? That's important for people to be able to understand and to process information sometimes. Can you change how the displays are viewed or the captions are viewed? Many users need to change the caption size. They need to change the spacing. They may need to change the foreground and background color to work with their eyes and their brains. And so if you can choose a player that allows you to manipulate how those captions are viewed, it's going to be more accessible over just seeing captions that are presented in size 12 font. And is there an interactive transcript? The text highlights as you are playing your multimedia element is very beneficial to people with tracking issues, visual issues, attention issues, and comprehension or cognitive issues. So if, as we continue down this digital continuum, if you can find players or elements that have these features, you're going to increase the participation of your audience. So a basic checklist when you are thinking about creating content or choosing an element. Is your content captioned? Do your videos include an audio track, or is your content auditorily described well in the creation? Are your slide decks, visual materials also represented in an accessible document outside the video or presentation? And later today, you should be hearing a presentation on accessible documents. So you can use those document checkers to really ensure that your PowerPoint slides are accessible, your Google Slides, your Google Docs, your Word docs, your PDFs are accessible. And that's really important because it doesn't do us very much good to present that PowerPoint slide up as a separate document if the user still can't use it. Any podcast that you might choose, does that include an accurate transcript? What about those vlogs, the video logs? Is there accurate representation on those as well? Are your multimedia players accessible? And when you're engaging in a live presentation, is your automatic transcription turned on for your event? Some resources for you. The Audio Description Project is a great resource. If you have, if you're curious and want to look for audio described content to add, there is a lot of good information on here, and it will tell you how much of the content, how much content there is with audio description that they keep a updated list of. If you have a video and you want to check if a video is described, you can actually search the master list here and possibly find an audio described track video and see if you can add that to your course, your website, or whatever you're creating and doing. Panopto, we use Panopto here at NC State. I've added a link here on how to add automatic captions to your video. Same thing with Zoom. We typically here in higher ed have become very familiar with Zoom over the last year, and starting in November, they added a tool to do automatic live transcription, and it's what we are using here today. If you go down to your CC button and choose the live transcript button. YouTube has been around and been able to do automatic captioning for a while. So there's a resource link here if you're not familiar with how to do that, or if you want to add that into any content or maybe assignments, provide it to your students to start helping them create accessible videos that they might be creating. PowerPoint, how to turn on those real-time captions. And then the World Wide Web organization has a great resource on making audio and video media accessible. I've provided that. And then Free Play Media, which is a vendor and a great vendor that does a lot of web cast and webinars on creating accessible content. They have a great little blog post about the 5 elements of accessible video. So I am going to end my presentation there and take some of these questions if you have them, and maybe get you out the door to lunch a little earlier. Yeah, there you go, Kate.
Sorry, Rebecca, we actually have someone who has raised their hand. So,
Okay.
oh, a couple of people. So we're going to start with Andrea or Andrea. I'm going to allow you to talk now, and if you'll ask your question.
I'm going to.
So she may butt in and interrupt us, but she has access to do that. The next question that we have is, are open captions preferable to optional closed captioning for online videos? If so, why?
I'm trying to follow the questions in the chat. Open captions to closed captions. I would, closed captions are generally better in media than open captions, but why? I'm not going to be able to answer that. I'm sorry. I think open and closed both have their benefits. I can't really answer for which one's better over the other. The open captions, if I'm not mistaken, allow you for a little bit more flexibility in manipulating them. The closed captions are captions that are added but may not be as manipulable. So I can look into it and get back to you. Shweta, I think here, or anybody wants to add, they can add. Brad, you guys, you might know.
Yeah, actually,
Go ahead, Brad.
Actually, I just wanted to add the one things that we tell our marketing department is we tell them to add both open and closed captions. One of the reasons for open captions, a benefit is that if someone's using a player that doesn't have the player features to run closed captions, then open captions will always be there just by default. Those are also called burned-in captions for those who are not familiar with the technology. So they're always on without manipulating to turn them on and off. And the reason we suggest closed captions to be on is because with closed captions, especially in YouTube, for example, you'll get a transcript that you can use that some people might need for access that you don't get from open captions. So having open captions and closed captions are a good best practice just because it's easy. Once you do open captions, then you can easily throw in a separate file that gives you closed captions. So there is a benefit to having both of them there.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself. Okay,
Brad.
Here we go. Do you have advice for someone like me that has a lot of videos that need captions or audio description? How do I prioritize the work that needs to be done?
I would go through, and if you have analytics, depend upon where this content lives. If you have analytics, run that and see which ones are most used or the most accessed, and start with those. If you are in course design, you have a course, you have a flow through to your videos, you might think of the priority of how they are accessed in the course. So send those out to be captioned. As you're redesigning content and choosing new content, keep this in mind. So as you're replacing content, you find accessible content. But as you go, I think the biggest priority is who accesses it the most and when is it going to be accessed. And then you just kind of move through your reserve of videos that way. If you have 40 videos and you run analytics and 2 of them are never or hardly ever used, then you would process those later. Never hurts to talk to your institution and see if they have a captioning contract with the vendor. Here at NC State, we have a captioning contract and a captioning grant, and we have got certain rates for certain vendors, so that can save you a little bit of money. And then it's always that balance of how far do I look in the World Wide Web for resources versus getting it captioned. So that's kind of how I would prioritize any content. If you have a large video reserve, is which ones do you use most often and how quickly do you need it? If you have time to search for it, search for it. If you don't, send it out.
Very cool. The next question is, in regards to the appearance of captions, is there a particular way captions embedded within videos should appear? Sometimes we post videos with captions embedded or burned in, especially for platforms like Instagram. I tried to research what is the preferred way for captions to appear, but didn't find much.
The captions, when they're burned in, are created on the bottom. The Instagram captioning is relatively a new feature. I honestly have had difficulty with the Instagram captions because the way that it's done, it sometimes burns it over the visual content that you need to see, and that can be an issue. With any of these platforms that are trying to meet accessibility guidelines and add accessibility and captions to their product as they go, I'm very vocal about sending an email to the platform going, hey, it's great you've done this, but you might need to do it a different way. The one thing I love about Zoom is it allows you to move those captions on the screen and around, and it actually allows you to change the size. So the burned in captions can be a problem, especially if it's visual on top of visual information, and there's not a way to change those size-wise or contrast-wise.
Yes, and I think we would all agree that social media is its own sort of digital accessibility thing. I'm going to call it a thing for now. So next question, how responsive have you found vendors to be when you point out accessibility issues with their materials?
Some are very responsive and some are not. The podcast that I pulled earlier, I had a librarian who actually handles most of our accessible media for us reach out in his own class. He had a podcast that was not captioned and or did not have a transcript. So in New York, the New York Radio Labs, that Radio Lab example I showed you, they have an accessibility statement on their website, which Brad mentioned. Yes, and, anytime you're creating content, if you are placing that up on a website, placing that in Moodle, please put an accessibility statement and a way for people to contact you if you find something's got a barrier in it and you're not able to access it, or they're not able to access it, so you can fix it. So that New York Radio Labs, I took that email address, I restated their accessibility statement. I said, you said you have a commitment to accessibility. I need a transcript of this. And I really expected them just to give me like a word transcript without who said what and whatever, just plain text. And they went through, and within a week, they sent me back the link to the correct to the podcast with the transcript added. And so that video that podcast was a couple years old. So they had done what we all do in trying to manage moving forward in digital accessibility and creating transcripts for new content. And then when asked or as they have time, incorporating the older content. And so it really didn't take long, and it was very responsive. I recently, I'm taking a couple of courses, and recently had a video on a website that didn't have captioning, and reached out to the vendor there and asked them, hey, do you mind adding caption to your video? It took a couple of weeks to get a response. And I think, especially this was an accessibility website. This was somebody, being forward with accessibility in education and universal design. And I think it caught them off guard that they didn't have captioning on their website. So it took them a little bit, but they did finally get back to me. In general, if you can do it in the right way and find that right contact to get it done, I think asking really, really, really goes a long way, instead of just saying it's not there, they're not going to do it, they don't have it. It's never going to hurt. And it actually may not be in time for your access, especially if you're picking content that is needing to be accessed pretty quickly, but it could benefit future access, which is important. All right.
So we're going to go to, we've got two folks that have their hands raised. So I am asking you all to unmute. That's Andrea and Nathan. So, Nathan, I see you've unmuted. So if you want to ask Rebecca your question.
Oh, yeah, I didn't have a question, but I had a recommendation for somebody who had asked about workflows if you have a lot of videos that need to be captioned. I work at Behavioral Health Springboard in the school social work, and video editing is probably about 85% of what I do. I use a tool called Descript. It's not free. I think we pay about $35 a month, but you upload your video. It does the automatic transcription. It's a little better than the other services I've used. But what's really unique about it is you can, once the transcription is ready, you can edit the video by editing the transcription. So if you change a sentence in the transcription, it'll edit the video. And what that has allowed me to do is create sort of the first rough edit of our videos while checking the caption and making sure it's accurate at the same time. And then once I'm done with that first edit and that first process, I can export out the Premiere Pro or DaVinci or whatever tool it is you use. But if you're really making a lot of videos and you need captions for them, I really recommend it. It's going to be a huge time saver for you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, thank you, Nathan. We take all the resources. Okay, we've got 2 more questions. It looks like we've got about 6 more minutes. If you're hearing soft growling, I have 2 puppies that have decided it's time to play. So I apologize in advance. So as a follow-up, you mentioned players that allow viewers to manipulate captions. What are some of those players?
I can reach out with a list. I don't know any right off the top of my head. Most of the time it's when I'm looking at content, that's what I'm looking for. I don't have a separate player that I actually run the content through. I don't teach. And so a lot of times I'm not necessarily looking for those players unless I am teaching or sharing information. And so just keeping that in mind as a content creator and somebody that may be running content through another platform.
And Howie would like to know, do you have much experience with Chrome's live caption feature?
That's a relatively new feature. I would say it's about 3 months old now. The live transcript and the voice to text option, the speech recognition in Google is pretty good. All these engines are built off machine learning and artificial intelligence. So as people use the products more, it's kind of the algorithms make it more accurate. So I don't have a lot of personal experience with it. I have had some students that have emailed me and said they love it and are using it to when they're searching the internet and a video comes up and plays, they are utilizing it. So that's the extent of my experience at the moment. I haven't heard anything negative about it, and I've had students reach out to me and say they are using it. I do know that I use the speech recognition component in Chrome, and that the transcription is pretty good. So I expect the live captioning, depending upon the audio quality, to be pretty good as well.